If you were born in 1990, this is your origin story, and trust me, you're going to want to know what was happening in the land of the rising sun. Picture this. Japan's economy is riding high. Wallets are fat, and the world's watching in awe. Until, well, things got a little shaky, both economically and seismically. It was also a big year for me because this is the year I moved to Japan. But enough about me. Let's break it down. One of the most iconic events in boxing history took place when Mike Tyson faced Buster Douglas at Tokyo Dome on February 11th. Undefeated Mike Tyson was one of the scariest boxers anybody could face. I mean, he was knocking everybody out. This event drew significant global attention and remains a landmark moment in boxing history. Why? Not just because of the location, but Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson in the 10th round. On the entertainment scene, 3 bands stood out: Bees, Southern All-Stars, and Dreams Come True. Bees released their album Wicked Beat in November 1990. The album reflects Bees' rising stardom and saw strong sales in the final months of the year. Southern All-Stars released their album, Southern All-Stars, with this very interesting cover in January 1990. This album capitalized on their established popularity and ranked high in annual sales. Now, one of my favorites, Dreams Come True. Their album, Love Goes On, was released in 1989, but sales carried into 1990, making it a top seller for the year. Launch of the Hiten lunar probe. On January 24, 1990, Japan launched Hiten, its first lunar probe, marking a significant milestone in its space exploration efforts. This was the first robotic lunar probe since the Soviet Union's Luna 24 in 1976, and the first probe launched by a country other than the Soviet Union and United States. It represented a significant technological achievement, demonstrating Japan's growing capabilities in aerospace engineering. The probe successfully entered orbit and conducted several experiments, including the release of a smaller orbiter, Hagoromo, though the latter's transmitter ended up failing. The Human Genome Project. In 1990, the Human Genome Project formally began as an international effort to map all human genes. Japan played a significant role through institutions like RIKEN, which later established a genomic science center. While the project's major outcomes came later, Japan's involvement from the outset highlighted its growing presence in global biological sciences. Emperor Akihito's enthronement on November 12th. Following the death of Emperor Hirohito in 1989, his son Akihito was formally enthroned as the 125th Emperor of Japan in a traditional ceremony at the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. This marked the beginning of the Heisei era. Hei meaning peace, Sei meaning accomplishment, symbolizing a new chapter of hope for the nation. It should be noted that Japanese people do not refer to the emperor by name, which is considered disrespectful. Instead, they would refer to him as Tenno Heika, which translates to His Majesty the Emperor. More on this in another video. The economic bubble peaks and begins to burst. 1990 was the tail end of Japan's economic bubble, a period of rampant speculation in real estate and stocks. The Nikkei stock index hit its all-time high of 38,915 in December 1989, but by 1990, cracks started to appear as the Bank of Japan raised interest rates to cool the overheated economy. This triggered a stock market crash and the start of the prolonged economic downturn, later known as the Lost Decade. It was a dramatic shift from the prosperity of the 1980s. So much for the era of hope. Japanese Grand Prix drama. On October 21st, the Formula One race at Suzuka became infamous for the first lap collision between rivals Senna and Prost. Senna, starting from pole position, crashed into Prost on the first corner, knocking both drivers out of the race. This controversial incident clinched Senna's second world championship, reversing the previous year's outcome when a similar crash had favored Prost. It's remembered as one of the most dramatic moments in motorsports. Political scandal. This year saw rapid changes in leadership. Prime Minister Toshiki Kaifu took office in 1989, but faced significant challenges in 1990 as the Liberal Democratic Party, the LDP, grappled with the fallout of the recruit scandal, a bribery affair that had toppled his predecessor, Noboru Takeshita. Kaifu jumped into the deep end as Japan navigated economic uncertainty and international pressure, notably during debates over contributions to the Gulf War, which ended up being approximately $13 billion. Mount Unzen awakens. While the major eruption occurred in 1991, Mount Unzen in Nagasaki Prefecture began showing signs of activity in 1990, after being dormant for nearly 200 years. Minor earthquakes and steam emissions foreshadowed the start of a volcanic cycle that would later prove deadly. But it wasn't all bad news. Who could forget the Super Famicom launch on November 21st? Nintendo Super Famicom, known as Super Nintendo Entertainment System outside of Japan, took the world by storm. This 16-bit gaming console became a cultural phenomenon. Its launch in Japan was a massive success, with initial shipments selling out instantly, sparking a gaming revolution that influenced entertainment worldwide for generations. All in all, 1990 was a pivotal year for Japan and set the stage for the challenges and changes of the 1990s. 1991 was the year the world hit fast forward, from the birth of the World Wide Web to innovation and cultural collisions. These are the moments that changed everything. On the world stage, the Soviet Union collapsed and grunge went from Seattle's clubs to the mainstream as Nirvana's Nevermind gave voice to a restless generation. In Japan, the economy was slowing down, but J-pop and anime began their global takeover. Technological and infrastructure milestones. On January 1st, telephone numbers in Tokyo were expanded from 7 digits to 8 digits. Up until 1991, Tokyo phone numbers followed this format, but the number 3 was added and the new format became this. This was due to the rapid increase in demand for phone lines, driven by population growth, economic expansion, and the proliferation of new communication devices like fax machines, which we still use today. The Tohoku Shinkansen, the bullet train connecting Ueno Station and Aomori, was extended on June 20th to include Tokyo Station. The completion of this extension solidified the Tohoku Shinkansen's role as a vital artery for northeastern Japan, boosting economic and social ties to Tokyo. Approximately 82 million people take this train every year. On August 14th, NTT Docomo was founded, laying the groundwork for Japan's mobile communication revolution, though its impact wouldn't emerge for years. The company has an estimated revenue of 4.71 trillion yen per year right now. Now, it doesn't cost trillions of yen, but a little support goes a long way. If you enjoy these videos, consider supporting the channel using the Ko-Fi or Ko-fi link. I'm not sure how to say it, but use the link in the description. Sporting highlights. On July 31st, the Lotte Orions baseball team announced their relocation to Chiba, becoming the Chiba Lotte Marines, a move that reshaped Japan's professional baseball landscape. Japan hosted the World Athletics Competition in Tokyo from August 23rd to September 1st, where Sachiko Yamashita won a silver in the women's marathon, Japan's first medal at the event. On October 20th, Ayrton Senna clinched his third F1 Drivers' Championship at the Japanese Grand Prix in Suzuka. On June 15th, the International Olympic Committee awarded the 1998 Winter Olympics to Nagano.
第18回冬季オリンピック競技大会長野が開催をする栄誉を与えられました。
affirming Japan's growing stature in hosting major international events. And Nicholas Pettis, the blue-eyed samurai, moved to Japan from Denmark to join the Uchideshi program under Mas Oyama at the Kyokushin Kaikan Honbu Dojo in Ikebukuro. The last student of Mas Oyama, he went on to win the K1 Japan Grand Prix Championship in 2001. He now has a gym in Tokyo and has a really fun channel called Junk Food Japan. Check it out at the link in the description. Political shifts. On October 3rd, Prime Minister Toshiki Kaifu resigned amid political turmoil, marking the end of his tenure, which began in 1989. His departure reflected internal struggles within the LDP and set the stage for Kiichi Miyazawa to take over later that month. This shift occurred during a period of economic uncertainty as Japan's asset bubble, which had peaked in 1989, was slowly deflating, signaling the start of the lost decade. Natural disasters. On June 3rd, Mount Unzen in Nagasaki Prefecture erupted, unleashing a deadly pyroclastic flow that killed 43 people, including volcanologists studying the event. It was one of Japan's deadliest volcanic eruptions in decades. Later, on September 27th, a major typhoon struck, claiming 45 lives and causing widespread damage, further underscoring Japan's vulnerability to natural disasters. But it wasn't all bad news. There were cultural and entertainment milestones. This year saw the release of influential Japanese video games such as Sonic the Hedgehog, which became a global hit and strengthened Japan's gaming industry and making the Sega Genesis a major gaming console. In film, Studio Ghibli's Only Yesterday, directed by Isao Takahata, was released, earning critical acclaim for its emotional storytelling and animation. Atsuko Maeda of AKB48 was also born in 1991, and the passing of several prominent figures reminded us of the fleeting nature of life. Among them, Soichiro Honda, founder of Honda Motor Corporation, and Shintaro Abe, prominent politician and father of Shinzo Abe. The average exchange rate for 1991 was approximately 134 yen to the US dollar, with a high of 137 and a low of 129, ending the year at about 125. These events collectively paint a picture of a nation navigating economic transition, natural disasters, and cultural evolution. Step into 1992, a year that left an indelible mark on Japan. From seismic political shifts and nature's unpredictability to thrilling sports moments and vibrant cultural breakthroughs. This was a time of change and resilience. Join me as I dive into the defining events that shaped Japan. It was the year of the Summer Olympics in Barcelona and the Winter Olympics in Albertville, France. The Japanese Olympic baseball team won a bronze medal at the Barcelona Olympics in 1992. There were some surprising political events too. The year started out with a viral moment, no pun intended. Okay, pun intended. In January, the emperor welcomed President George H.W. Bush, but the visit took a sour turn when Bush, reportedly suffering from a 24-hour flu, fell over and vomited on Prime Minister Kiichi Miyazawa during a state dinner. Really, it wasn't the food. The year was marked by significant political turbulence. The Sagawa Express scandal erupted, ensnaring over 200 politicians in a web of bribery allegations linked to the delivery and logistics giant and the Yakuza. It just might be Japan's biggest corruption scandal since World War II. But stick around, that's where the 1990s said, "Hold my sake." This led to the resignation of Prime Minister Kiichi Miyazawa's cabinet, though he hung by a thread to power until mid-1993. Between dinner with the president and the scandal, this was a bad year for Miyazawa. There was a very unusual natural disaster, the Sanriku Oki ultra-slow earthquake. This event occurred in the northern Japan Trench and is classified as an ultra-slow earthquake, which seems like a misnomer. But this went on for about a day. It caused minor damage, and while not as devastating as the Mount Unzen eruption the year before, it kept disaster preparedness in focus and served as a reminder of Japan's vulnerability to natural disasters. Technological and economic shifts. Japan's economy continued to grapple with the bursting of the acid bubble. You know when you were a kid and you'd stuff 3 pieces of bubble gum into your mouth and make a big bubble and it bursts all over your face, sticks to your face? That's kind of how Japan felt at the time. On August 18th, the Nikkei index hit a low of 14,309, a massive decline from its 1989 peak of nearly 39,000. Now this represents a drop of over 60%. The economic stagnation deepened the lost decade, impacting businesses and households. Meanwhile, on December 1st, the Kansai International Airport's artificial island in Osaka Bay saw its first reclamation completed, a bold infrastructure project that wouldn't fully open until 1994, but symbolized Japan's long-term investment ambitions. Let's move on to some international moments. In September, Japan upset its neighbors by deploying its first overseas military contingent since World War II. Now, settled down was mostly engineers and ceasefire monitors to Cambodia as part of UNTAC, which stood for the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia, signaling a cautious step toward international engagement. The operation was commonly referred to on the Japanese news as a PKO, or peacekeeping operation. Japanese citizens showed mixed reactions. Some saw it as Japan stepping onto the world stage as peacekeepers. Others saw it as a direct violation of the renunciation of war in Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, a slippery slope. And there had been voices in Japan at the time criticizing Article 9. They wanted to delete it from the Constitution altogether. As you can guess, China and Korea were not happy with this move. Of course, we got into some good news, so let's get to that. There were cultural milestones. The most popular haircut at the time was the Hime cut. Hime meaning princess. Harajuku and Shibuya were incubators for trends that would later go global. The Gyaru look was popular, and the god-awful Ganguro look, extreme tans with bright makeup, which kind of made girls resemble raccoons, was the preferred way to be unique, just like everyone else. Splash Mountain opened at Tokyo Disneyland on October 1st, boosting the park's appeal and reinforcing Japan's embrace of Western entertainment. Fun fact, Tokyo Disneyland, the first Disney park built outside of the United States, is actually located in the neighboring prefecture of Chiba, but it's only a 21-minute train ride from Tokyo Station, so I think that's how they got away with it. Just think, if they called it Chiba Disneyland, would anybody visit? Senna extended his winning streak by winning the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, continuing Japan's prominence in global motorsport. The release of Mr. Baseball, starring Tom Selleck, an American film featuring Japanese baseball teams like the Chunichi Dragons and Yomiuri Giants, boosted interest in professional baseball in Japan, a cultural staple. In fact, it's such a big part of Japanese culture that when Otani went to play baseball in America, it sent shockwaves across the Pacific. Kids all over Japan were scratching their heads when they learned that Americans play baseball too. The Japanese Professional Football League, J-League, was formed in 1992 but did not officially launch until 1993. One day, there will probably be Japanese kids who were shocked to learn that they play football in England too. By football, I mean soccer. In Japan, they call it sakka, and they call American football amefuto. These events highlighted a year of political reckoning, economic adjustment, and cultural growth amid Japan's evolving global role. That was the year 1992, and if you think that was a crazy year, Wait till you see what happened in 1993. What happened in Japan in 1993? Well, as you can guess, plenty. There were major political events. The LDP loses power in the general election in July. The LDP, which had ruled Japan since 1955, failed to secure a majority in the House of Representatives election. With 256 seats needed for a majority, the LDP only won 223 seats, losing its grip on government for the first time. Hosokawa became the first non-LDP prime minister as a leader of a coalition government. Internal factionalism, a string of scandals, specifically the Sagawa Express scandal, and economic stagnation were the key factors. The election reshaped Japanese politics, temporarily breaking the LDP's monopoly and setting the stage for future reforms. Speaking of reforms, the new Hosokawa government prioritized political reform to address corruption and the multi-seat constituency system blamed for money politics. In November, the coalition passed reform bills, though compromises diluted their impact. In August, a statement issued by Chief Cabinet Secretary Yohei Kono acknowledged the Imperial Japanese Army's involvement in coercing comfort women during World War II and expressed remorse. Reception was mixed. Japanese conservatives thought it went too far, but victims' rights groups thought it was insincere. Too little, too late. There were natural disasters. The Kushido earthquake. On January 15th, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Kushido, Hokkaido, killing 2 people and injuring over 600. The power went out for 57,000 people, though it was restored by the next day. The Hokkaido tsunami. On July 12th, the southwest Hokkaido open sea earthquake, another 7.8 magnitude earthquake, struck in the Sea of Japan, southwest of Hokkaido, killing 230 people. A tsunami struck within 5 minutes of the earthquake, leaving residents absolutely no warning. The Kagoshima floods. In August, a series of heavy torrential rains hit Kagoshima, resulting in 71 deaths. 2,500 people were stranded in cars, buses, and trains until they were rescued by ferries and fishing boats. There were technological breakthroughs. Blue LED development. Japanese scientists Isamu Akasaki, Hiroshi Amano, and Shuji Nakamura achieved a significant milestone by producing blue LED light from semiconductors. Though practical application came later, their work in 1993 laid the critical groundwork for energy-efficient lighting, displays, and Blu-ray technology, winning them the 2014 Nobel Prize in Physics. Hybrid assistive limb research. After earning his PhD in robotics, Yoshiyuki Sankai completed a 3-year project of mapping out the neurons governing leg movement. This was the foundation of the development of hybrid assistive limb technology, known as HAL, a robotic exosuit. A prototype was later developed in 1997. Apparently, he was not aware that the name HAL might evoke unintended associations with fictional technology.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
There were economic shifts, with trade friction between Japan and the U.S. Japan's $50 billion trade surplus with the United States continued to strain bilateral relations. President Clinton took an aggressive stance, including the threat of tariffs, and pressed Japan to open its markets and reduce non-tariff trade barriers. These tensions influenced Japan's economic policies, including efforts to stimulate domestic demand to reduce reliance on exports. There were fiscal stimulus packages. To counter the economic downturn, the Japanese government introduced a series of stimulus measures. In August, the government announced a 13.2 trillion yen stimulus package aimed at boosting infrastructure spending and supporting small businesses. However, these measures had limited immediate impact on reviving growth. There were cultural milestones. The royal wedding on June 9th. Crown Prince Naruhito, now the Emperor, married Masako Owada, a former diplomat, in a highly publicized ceremony. This event captivated the nation, blending tradition with modern media coverage, and marked a significant moment for the imperial family. It's reported that he proposed to her 3 times before she accepted. Music and entertainment. The J-pop scene flourished with artists like Zard and Mr. Children gaining prominence. Zard's album Yurere Omoi and Mr. Children's Versus were among the top-selling releases, reflecting the growing influence of J-pop both domestically and regionally. The anime Sailor Moon R aired, solidifying its cultural impact and global fanbase. In film, the release of Sonatine, directed by Takeshi Kitano, known also as Beat Takeshi, was a cinematic highlight, earning critical acclaim at international festivals like Cannes and showcasing Japan's evolving film industry. It also got significant attention from Quentin Tarantino. Studio Ghibli's Ocean Waves also debuted. Though initially a TV movie, it later gained recognition for its subtle storytelling. And more gaming news. The video game industry saw significant releases, including The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, released exclusively for the Game Boy, and Secret Mana for the Super NES. These games became iconic, influencing global gaming culture. Bullet hell video game genre. The video game Batsugun by Taoplan released in 1993, is considered the ancestor of the modern bullet hell or danmaku genre. It influenced later games like Donpachi, which was released in 1995. Danmaku is translated often as barrage, but it literally means bullet curtain in Japanese. This genre, characterized by complex enemy patterns and dense projectile waves, emerged as Japan's developers competed with the rise of 3D games, influencing global gaming trends. In sports, professional soccer took a major step with the launch of J-League, Japan's first fully professional football league, on May 15th. Its debut match between Verdy Kawasaki and Yokohama Marinos sparked widespread enthusiasm. The league's inaugural season drew an average of 17,000 spectators per match, reflecting its immediate popularity. And some really big news. In January, Hawaiian-born sumo wrestler Akebono Taro, born Chadwick Haheo Rowan, a 6'8", 514-pound sumo wrestler, became the first non-Japanese to achieve the rank of Yokozuna, the highest rank in professional sumo. Sadly, he died of heart failure in 2024. He was 54. His promotion was a cultural milestone, bridging Japan and the US, but he faced some resistance from traditionalists. In television, the drama Asunara Hakusho aired, becoming a cultural milestone for its emotional storytelling and influence on the trendy drama genre. It was adapted from the manga series of the same name by Fumi Simon. There were 11 episodes in the series, and it went by various names overseas, such as Asunara White Paper, Asunara Confessions, and Ordinary People. That was the year 1993, a real roller coaster for Japan. The story continues, though. You have to see what happened in 1994. It just keeps getting crazier. What happened in Japan in 1994? Hope you're ready for this. The country was still staggering from the collapse of the asset bubble of the early 1990s, and 1994 just piled on even more chaos. While there were some life-changing tech breakthroughs, there were political shakeups and economic shakedowns that rocked the nation. With creepy cults and tragedy on the track, there was a dark cloud settling over Japan. Now, you know what this is, right? It's a QR code. QR meaning quick response. They're used for everything from cashless payments to restaurant menus these days, which everybody seems to hate, including me. But they were invented to track auto parts by a company called Denso Wave, a subsidiary of Denso. Now, I know there's some gamers watching the channel, so let's get right into console wars. There were two major launches in 1994. In November, Sega launched the Sega Saturn in Japan. It had some momentum until Sony stole the show. On December 3rd, Sony dropped the original PlayStation with CD-ROMs and 3D graphics. It redefined what video games could be. The tagline? Play has no limits, which is true if you've ever stayed up for 48 hours playing Ridge Racer. Let's talk about the economy. What would make the exchange rate easy to calculate? If you guessed 100 yen to the dollar, you'd be right. And that's exactly what happened in 1994. But Japan's economy depends heavily on exports. The strong yen made life very painful, especially for the electronics and auto sectors. Japan had resisted restructuring for decades, but now it was inevitable. The lifetime employment model? A thing of the past. Promotions based purely on seniority? Slowing down. Layoffs? Now on the table. And for young people just starting out their careers, this was a gut punch. Suddenly there was no guarantee of lifetime employment, something that their parents had grown up with and they had come to expect. This uncertainty led to fewer people getting married, fewer new home sales, and domestic consumption as a result took a nosedive. This caused the economy to stall even more. And just like that, the economy put Japan in the friend zone. I don't have any more bad analogies, so let's just move on to culture. On September 8th, Eijiro Tono, one of Japan's most iconic actors, passed away at the age of 86. You may know him from classic films like Seven Samurai and Tokyo Story. And on May 1st, tragedy struck the world of motorsports. Ayrton Senna, adored by Japanese fans, died in a crash during the San Marino Grand Prix. He was just 34. The reaction in Japan was intense. TV reporters broke down in tears while announcing the news. Very rare for a country where people are known for holding back their emotions. But even in a hard year, there were new beginnings. In 1994, several now famous people were born. Mayu Watanabe, also known as Mayuyu of AKB48, was born on March 26th. Airi Suzuki of the J-pop group Cute was born on April 12th. And Shohei Ohtani, yes, that Ohtani, was born on July 5th. And speaking of baseball, the Yomiuri Giants had the only perfect game of the decade on May 18th. They beat the Hiroshima Toyo Carp 6-0. Now let's talk architecture. We haven't done that on this series yet, but now's a good time to start because on April 25th, the Shinjuku Park Tower opened. It was designed by Kenzo Tange, and the upper floors of the tower house the Park Hyatt Hotel, the same hotel featured in Lost in Translation. The New York bar with its incredible skyline view became a destination in its own right. The Kansai International Airport, KIX or KIX, opened on September 4th. It was built on an artificial island in Osaka Bay, and it would eventually go on to serve 30 million passengers a year. Let's move on to politics, everybody's favorite topic. The Japanese government in 1994 looked like a game of musical chairs. First, Prime Minister Morihiro Hosokawa, who came in promising reforms, was forced to resign in April after only 8 months in office under allegations of financial misconduct. So much for reforms. Quick note, in the 1993 video, I called him Morihiko Hosokawa. I apologize for the mistake, but unlike him, I won't be resigning. So back to the story. After Hosokawa resigned, Tsutomu Hata stepped in, leading a minority coalition. But that collapsed 2 months later when the Socialist Party pulled out. Yep, it's always the socialists. And then came the real curveball, a clear sign of how unstable Japanese politics had become. Tomoichi Murayama, the man with the famous eyebrows, and head of the Japan Socialist Party, became prime minister in June. He led a coalition of the Liberal Democratic Party and the new party Sakigake, which is hard to say, but Murayama was the first socialist to lead Japan since 1948. Everyone, including socialists, were stunned. Now, if you study Japanese history, you know that socialists are not the most popular politicians in Japan. Now we turn to natural disasters. Japan sits on the ring of fire, so earthquakes are expected. But even by Japanese standards, 1994 was an active year. There was an earthquake off the shore of Hokkaido on October 4th. It triggered a tsunami with waves of up to 1.7 meters. 10 people died, and there was moderate damage in northern Japan. It happened just before 1:30 in the morning. Then on December 28th, the Sanriku Haruka-oki earthquake hit. The epicenter was in the Pacific, east of Hachinohe in Aomori Prefecture. This one only caused a tsunami up to 55 centimeters high, and the damage was limited to the coastline. But this was just a precursor for things to come. The Tohoku earthquake in 2011 happened in the same region. But not all disasters were natural disasters. On June 27th, the doomsday cult Om Shinrikyo released sarin gas into a residential neighborhood in Matsumoto, Nagano. 8 people died and over 200 were injured. At first, police blamed a local man, thinking he had accidentally released toxic gas while handling pesticides. The truth, it turns out, was far more sinister. Om Shinrikyo had 2 reasons for this attack. First, they were in a property dispute and they expected the 3-judge panel to rule against them. So instead of taking their chances in court, they decided to just kill the judges. Second, the attack was a trial run for what was coming next. That would happen in 1995, and that would change everything. Stay tuned for that. So yeah, 1994 was a rough year in Japan, but if you think that was intense, just wait till you see what happens in 1995. That's coming up next, so don't miss it. What happened in Japan in 1995? It was a year that shook Japan to its core and changed the nation forever. Picture this. A devastating earthquake rocks Kobe. A doomsday cult unleashes toxic fumes in Tokyo, and amidst the chaos, Japan's tech scene is sparking global revolutions while cultural moments redefine the zeitgeist. From heartbreak to breakthroughs, 1995 was a roller coaster of triumphs and trials. So grab a seat, let's rewind through the events that made this year unforgettable. Digital photography was just taking its first baby steps. What was the pioneering camera that brought this technology to everyday consumers? It was the Casio QV10, the first consumer digital camera to feature an LCD screen. That was a game changer, letting users see their photos instantly and just delete the ones they didn't want to keep. How amazing were those photos? The QV10 boasted a 0.25 megapixel resolution, producing images at 320 by 240 pixels. Now that's modest by today's standards, but cutting edge for the time. It also had a cutting edge price of 65,000 yen. That's about $691 in 1995 dollars or $1,430 today. And memory cards, well, unlike today's devices, the QV10 didn't accept memory cards. It came equipped with a built-in 2 megabyte flash memory, meaning it could store up to 96 images, making it a compact powerhouse for its era. But speaking of memory cards, SanDisk, in collaboration with Japanese companies like Toshiba, introduced the Compact Flash, or CF card, in 1995. This is what a CF card looks like next to an SD card. The Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation, both released in late 1994, gained significant traction. By 1995, the PlayStation was a global hit, selling 2.3 million units and establishing Sony as a gaming giant and influencing pop culture worldwide. Let's dive into HD TV. NHK, Japan Broadcasting Corporation, advanced its HD TV system building on decades of research. Haivision offered 1125 line resolution, far surpassing standard TV. Now, what would cause tens of thousands of people to gather in Akihabara for a midnight launch? None other than the release of Windows 95 on November 23rd. Windows 95 gave us the Start menu, the taskbar, right-click menus, drag and drop, and a better multimedia experience over Windows 3.1. What were the system requirements for Windows 95? A 386DX or higher, like a 486, and a minimum of 4 to 8 megabytes of RAM. You also needed a whole 55 megabytes of free space on your hard drive. To put that in perspective, the video you're watching right now is about 15 gigabytes on my hard drive. About processing power, in 1995, the Intel Pentium Pro was considered the best consumer computer processor on the market, particularly for high-end performance. Though its high cost and limited software optimization for 32-bit applications meant it was often overkill for typical home use. The cost of a personal home computer running an Intel Pentium processor with Windows 95 would set you back about $3,500. Adjusting for inflation, that'd be about $6,200 today. Up until now, VHS was king of home movies, with rental stores all over the country. Then Sony, Panasonic, and Philips got together and had a baby. Don't judge. They called it the DVD. To give you an idea of what a leap forward this was, a CD can hold 700 megabytes of data, while a DVD can hold up to 4.7 gigabytes of data. Launched in July by NTT Personal, DDI Pocket, and Astel, this phone worked as a cell phone outdoors and a cordless phone at home, offering free calls via base stations. Cheaper than a mobile phone for voice and texting, PHS used 2G technology, meaning they couldn't handle video, and while coverage was excellent in big cities, they're pretty much useless in the rural areas. Retail service ended in January 2021, but the technology did not die off completely. It lives on in IoT devices. Now, many professionals carried pagers called pokeberu, meaning pocket bell. Between the Peach and the Pocket Bell, young people developed a language of their own, using numbers to represent words. 4046 for yoroshiku, 0804 for Ohio, and 14106 for aishiteru. These devices influenced fashion. The rise of pagers and early mobile phones influenced accessory trends, with decorative phone straps becoming a status symbol. NTT was a dominant force in Japan's telecom sector. It was one of the largest telecom companies in the world at the time, benefiting from Japan's advanced infrastructure and early mobile technology adoption. Now let's talk about the economy. In 1995, Japan's GDP was about 5.5 trillion, making it one of the world's largest economies at the time. But still, businesses and banks were grappling with bad loans and deflationary pressures. The exchange rate was about 94 yen to the dollar. This strong yen hurt Japan's export-driven economy, making its goods more expensive abroad and reducing competitiveness, particularly in industries like electronics and automobiles. As you can guess, Japan was not a tourist destination in 1995. This economic climate led to a surge in 100-yen shops like Daiso and Kandu, which opened in 1993. They became cultural staples by offering affordable goods during tough times. The American clothing retailer Gap entered the Japanese market in 1995, quickly establishing a nationwide presence, winning over Japanese fans by collaborating with local designers. Japan experienced several significant cultural milestones across various domains, reflecting its dynamic blend of tradition and modernity. The anime Neon Genesis Evangelion, directed by Hideaki Anno, premiered on October 4th on Tokyo TV. This psychological and philosophical mecha series became a cultural phenomenon, influencing anime globally and spawning a franchise with lasting impact. Its debut marked a turning point in anime storytelling, emphasizing complex characters and existential themes. Additionally, Ghost in the Shell, a seminal cyberpunk anime film by Mamoru Oshii, was released, further cementing Japan's influence on global pop culture with exploration of technology and identity. The gaming industry thrived. Tales of Phantasia debuted on Super Famicom with innovative voice acting, setting a standard for the Tales series. Chrono Trigger launched with acclaimed storytelling and multiple endings. Virtua Fighter popularized 3D fighting games in arcades. Pokemon's first games, developed in 1995 and released in 1996, lay the foundation for this global juggernaut. By the way, what does Pokemon mean? Well, you gotta wait till the end of the video to find out. Now, two events that shook Japan and the world. The Great Hanshin Awaji earthquake. On January 17, 1995, a devastating earthquake struck Kobe, causing over 6,400 deaths, displacing more than 45,000 people. Local industries, infrastructure, and supply chains were all disrupted, exposing inefficiencies in government response and coordination. Japan's convenience stores and supermarkets have a just-in-time delivery system. Your local 7-Eleven receives several deliveries per day. That's why the food is fresh, but it also means that if trucks can't reach stores, there's no food. The convenience and logistics that people had come to rely on in their everyday lives became a liability. Then there was the Ohm Shinrikyo subway gas attack. I was here in Tokyo on that day. I still remember where I was. On the morning of March 20th, 1995, the Doomsday Cult Ohm Shinrikyo released sarin gas, a deadly nerve agent, on 3 lines of the Tokyo subway system, Chiyoda, Marunouchi, and Hibiya, during the morning rush hour. They were targeting trains that converged at the Kasumi-Gaseki station, a hub for government workers. Now, their goal was to overthrow the Japanese government and establish a theocratic state. Would you believe there used to be trash cans all over Tokyo? Every train platform, every street corner had a trash can. After the attack, the garbage cans were removed, never to return. So if you're walking around Tokyo all day with an empty water bottle, you know who to blame. But what was transportation like at the time? Today, I can tap my phone at almost any train station, subway, or bus, and pay automatically with the Passmo app on my phone. I can charge that Passmo through my credit card at any time, day or night. But back in 1995, commuters in Tokyo primarily paid using cash, paper tickets, and early forms of prepaid cards. Tokyo commuters relied primarily on single-journey paper tickets purchased at station counters or vending machines, with fares based on distance traveled. Commuters had to navigate charts or consult staff, wait in line, insert their tickets into a manual or semi-operated gate, which collected them upon exit. Regular travelers like students and office workers often use paper-based commuter passes called Teikiken, offering unlimited travel on specific routes. Cash remained dominant, especially for the occasional traveler, with vending machines and counters accepting coins and some banknotes, while fare adjustment machines or staff handled underpayments at destination stations. Now, the people working at the train station were amazing. They would look at your ticket and automatically know if you had paid the right fare. Prepaid magnetic cards such as JR East's Orange Card and IO Card were gaining popularity, allowing ticket purchases or direct use at compatible gates, though commuters still had to physically insert the card into the gate. Other operators like Tokyo Metro and private railways had their own prepaid card systems. Lack of compatibility between the systems meant that commuters had to purchase several tickets along their commute if they're transferring between train companies. While contactless IC cards like Suica and Passmo were still 6 years away, magnetic cards and early automated gates laid the groundwork for future advancements. Turning to politics now, the Murayama Statement. On August 15, 1995, Prime Minister Tomoichi Murayama issued a landmark statement expressing deep remorse and heartfelt apology for Japan's wartime aggression, particularly in Asia. This was known as the Murayama Statement. It became a cornerstone of Japan's official policy on historical responsibility, though it sparked domestic and international debate. But I told you, 1995 was a crazy year. Will we get a break in 96? Stay tuned to find out. Oh, probably thought I forgot to tell you, what does Pokemon mean? Well, it comes from Pocket Monster, because they're small, they can fit in your pocket, and they're monsters. What happened in Japan in 1996? Today, we're once again opening the time capsule for a peek at a year that shaped Japanese culture, technology, and history in ways that still reverberate today. From digital pets to disaster recovery and massive infrastructure projects, this was a year of bold innovation and vibrant trends. We'll explore the rise of pop culture icons, famous birthdays, new game controllers. Then we'll touch on what happened in the economy and a major criminal investigation. So buckle up as we take a nostalgic trip through another transformative year in Japan's history. Let's start with culture. You might not recognize the names Aki Maita or Akihiro Yokoi, but you will recognize the digital pet they created that captivated the world. Their quirky creation earned them the 1997 Ig Nobel Prize for Economics, a cheeky nod to their role as the parents of this new phenomenon. What was it called? The Tamagotchi, and Bandai sold 400,000 of them in 1996, approximately 91 million to date. And what would cause high school girls to cover their legs with glue? Loose socks, of course, which became popular in the 1990s, particularly around 1996. They were closely related to the Kogal subculture, where high school girls wore oversized, slouchy white socks with their uniforms. Right now, there must be women all over Japan looking at their high school photos saying, "What was I thinking?" How do you take 6 young men and make them the most overexposed stars in Japan? Simple. Give them a cooking show. Smap by Smap launched in 1996. This variety show on Fuji Television became a cornerstone of Smap's fame, featuring comedy skits and cooking segments like Bistro Smap. The show ran 20 years until SMAP disbanded in 2016, but the members of SMAP were everywhere. TV, movies, radio, collectively appearing in over 500 commercials during their career. Let's not forget the music, which wasn't that good, but their song Aoi Inazuma peaked at number 1 in 1996, selling over 8 million copies. The aggressive marketing of Johnny and Associates made them household names. Kimura Takiya, also known as Kim Taku, became a cultural icon starring in the 1996 drama Long Vacation. In case you're wondering where they got the name SMAP, it's an acronym for Sports, Music, Assemble, People. We got some famous birthdays. Minatozaki Sana and Momo Hirai of the South Korean girl pop group Twice. Makenyu Arata, who played Roronoa Zoro in the live-action One Piece series and appeared in Pacific Rim Uprising. Nanaka Matsu, known for films like The World of Kaneko and Martin Scorsese's Silence. Ryusei Yokohama from Kamen Rider Fourze, as well as extensive work in Japanese dramas and films. Eliza Ikeda from Wolf Girl and Black Prince, and other Japanese dramas and films. Last but not least, Mizuki Fukumura, a key member of Morning Musume and Hello Project. There were major infrastructure projects. Traffic in Tokyo is no joke, and if you want to go from Kawasaki to Chiba, what's the best way to go? Well, you could drive your car and take your chance with traffic. It could take a couple hours, or you can take a train with a few thousand of your closest friends. Or you could build a 15-kilometer bridge tunnel combination connecting the two. The Tokyo Bay Aqualine was completed in 1996 and opened in 1997. It's actually a bridge that turns into a tunnel, or I guess a tunnel that turns into a bridge depending on which direction you're going. The 9.6-kilometer undersea tunnel was one of the longest in the world at the time. The cost, a modest 1.44 trillion yen, about $11 billion at the time. The Fuji Television headquarters building on Odaiba and the Tokyo International Forum in Yurakucho were completed, and the atomic bomb dome in Hiroshima was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, all in 1996. What happened in politics? While 1995 was a game of musical chairs, 1996 was relatively stable. Tomiichi Murayama, leader of the Social Democratic Party, resigned as prime minister in January. His administration faced harsh criticism for its handling, or rather mishandling, of major crises, notably the Great Hanshin earthquake and the Tokyo subway sarin attack in 1995. Public and media perception often painted him as ineffective, but Murayama's resignation was partly timed to facilitate transition to Ryutaro Hashimoto of the LDP, seen as a stronger leader to address upcoming challenges, including a critical visit by U.S. President Bill Clinton in April 1996. Hashimoto had gained wide support in Japan when he publicly stood up to U.S. Trade Representative Mickey Cantor back in 1995. His willingness to confront the U.S. resonated with the Japanese public, which was frustrated by perceived American bullying, especially when Japan was already on the ropes. As far as disasters, on June 13, 1996, Garuda Indonesia Flight 865 from Fukuoka to Jakarta crashed during takeoff, resulting in the deaths of 3 passengers. Kobe was still recovering from the Great Hanshin earthquake. Over 48,000 prefabricated units were constructed to accommodate displaced residents. Critical infrastructure such as the port of Kobe and Hanshin Expressway were prioritized for repair. The port, a major economic hub, was partially operational within months, though full restoration took years. Over 20 million tons of debris were cleared, with much of it used to create artificial islands like Port Island for future development. Kobe implemented a comprehensive reconstruction plan focusing on rebuilding safer, more resilient structures. New buildings adhered to stricter seismic codes introduced post-earthquake. The port of Kobe, vital for international trade, was rebuilt with modernized facilities, regaining its status as a key shipping hub by the early 2000s. The disaster prompted urban redesign, including wider streets, more green spaces, and earthquake-resistant public buildings. Areas like Rokko Island were developed as new residential and commercial zones. Today, Kobe is a vibrant and thriving city. I've got a video from a recent trip, and I'll put a link downstairs so you can check it out. The investigation in Om Shinrikyo, the doomsday cult that released sarin gas on the Tokyo subway system on March 20, 1995, intensified. Hundreds of members were arrested. Investigators linked Om to the 1994 Matsumoto sarin attack, various murders, and plans for future attacks. Police uncovered an extensive chemical and biological weapons program. The government restricted Om's activities under the Anti-Subversive Activities Law. This sparked debate over religious group oversight and put other religious groups under the microscope. The cult's extensive operations and legal protections complicated the investigation. Loyal members refused to cooperate, but the probe successfully dismantled Om's infrastructure, which led to long-running trials and security reforms in Japan. Amid the chaos, there were technological breakthroughs. One reason Japan seems to be living in the future is the process of Kaizen, a philosophy of continuous improvement. Companies implement small, regular technological advancements, fostering steady progress. The population quickly adjusts to these small improvements, but if you've been away for 5 years, you might think you've come back to a completely different country. The Japan Meteorological Agency refined its forecasting techniques, leveraging technological improvements to enhance weather prediction accuracy. This is important because Japan experiences frequent, violent typhoons. Earthquake-resistant construction. With the Kobe earthquake still fresh in everyone's mind, there was a growing trend toward earthquake-resistant condominiums, driven by consumer demand for safer buildings in seismically active regions. That's why homes that were built after 1996 are more desirable than older homes. A new system was introduced to provide prompt and detailed information on road conditions, improving transportation efficiency and safety through real-time data. Okay, time for a little fun. The Nintendo 64 controller. Released on June 23rd, the Nintendo 64 controller introduced a thumb-operated analog control stick, offering precise movement control and near 360-degree navigation. Speaking of games, Red and Green was released as the first game in the Pokemon series on February 27th. Japan introduced initiatives to promote environmentally friendly cars and energy conservation campaigns, reflecting a growing focus on sustainable technologies. A campaign was launched to reduce pollution and conserve energy. Advancements showcased Japan's leadership in robotics technology, which was already being implemented in manufacturing, healthcare, and other sectors. Japan launched digital satellite broadcasting, significantly enhancing television broadcast capabilities and paving the way for more diverse content delivery. And Japan began experiencing mild deflation. Consumers and businesses, anticipating falling prices, reduced spending and investment, further entrenching economic stagnation. Japan's GDP was approximately $4.7 trillion, and the economy grew by 3.6%. The average exchange rate was about 108 yen to the dollar, compared to 94 yen in the previous year. This depreciation made Japanese exports more competitive, but increased the cost of imports, impacting domestic prices and consumer purchasing power. This led to monetary policy easing. The Bank of Japan maintained an ultra-low discount rate of 0.5%, hoping to stimulate demand amid the ongoing economic slowdown. Despite these efforts, bank lending remained sluggish, reflecting weak business confidence. Low interest rates failed to restart investment or consumption. By the way, observers have noted that the Bank of Japan building is in the shape of the character for yen. That was the year 1996, a little bit less dramatic than 1995, but we're not done yet. 1997 was fast approaching, with hybrid cars, rising taxes, and cartoons that cause seizures. Stay tuned for that. What happened in Japan in 1997? Welcome to a journey back in time to another pivotal year in Japan's modern history. From groundbreaking tech innovations to cultural moments and blockbuster movies, banking meltdowns, and political developments that set the stage for the future. It was a year that, once again, tested the resilience of the Japanese people. Let's start with technology. What was the first hybrid car? Toyota launched the Prius on October 24th. It hit showrooms December 9th, but it wasn't available in the US until the year 2000. And how do you make the PlayStation even better? The dual analog controller was introduced as an evolution of the original PlayStation controller. It was Sony's first attempt to incorporate dual analog sticks for 3D gaming. It was released primarily in Japan and had a limited run. But Sony wasn't done innovating. They released the DualShock soon after. It refined and expanded on the dual analog's features and became the standard PlayStation controller. Konami introduced Beatmania, defining the rhythm game genre. It laid the groundwork for future games like Dance Dance Revolution and Guitar Hero. Before the iPhone, there was the SoftBank DP211SW. On November 1st, SoftBank, then JPhone, released the first mobile phone to feature emojis, including everyone's favorite, the poop emoji. The Pokemon franchise was a major driver of Game Boy sales, particularly Pokemon Red, Green, and Blue. Pokemon Blue was a special mail-order version. Now that's how we used to order things before Rakuten and Amazon. The Nintendo 64 scene exploded with these bangers. Star Fox 64, a high-octane 3D rail shooter with epic dogfights. GoldenEye 007, a first-person shooter. Yoshi's Story, a colorful storybook adventure. And Doom 64, a Nintendo 64 exclusive with new levels, creepier demons, and intense action. The PlayStation, however, dominated the Japanese market, mainly due to blockbuster titles like Final Fantasy VII and Gran Turismo. Several games such as Kowloon's Gate and Front Mission 2 were exclusive to Japan, contributing to the PlayStation's strong regional appeal. What's your vibe? Tell me in the comments below. There were cultural milestones. The Osaka Dome was completed. It holds about 36,000 people, and that's where the Oryx Buffaloes play. You heard that right. There's actually a Japanese baseball team called the Oryx Buffaloes. And after dropping bangers like My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service, and Porco Rosso, you'd think that Hayao Miyazaki was tapped out, right? Wrong. You know what's coming up. This legend went full beast mode with Princess Mononoke. It smashed into theaters and set the ultimate anime standard. And what do you know about the indigenous people of Hokkaido? After Japan annexed the island in 1869, the Ainu were forced to assimilate and speak Japanese. Their culture nearly faded into the shadows, but in order to right the historic suppression, Japan introduced the Ainu Culture Law to promote Ainu culture and traditions. Before Elon Musk bought Twitter and renamed it X, there was X Japan. They were considered one of the founders of Visual Kei. Their music and look gave a voice to the teenagers of the lost generation. They were living the dream. But at the height of their fame, they called a press conference and called it quits. Vocalist Toshi explained that the glamorous life of a rock star failed to satisfy him emotionally. They played one last concert at Tokyo Dome on December 31st, which was a tradition for them. Later that evening, they played Forever Love on Kohaku Utagassen, a Japanese New Year TV show. The J-pop scene was thriving, though, with artists like Namie Amuro, the girl from Okinawa. She was cute, so cute in fact that fans didn't even seem to care that she couldn't carry a tune. But fans were just about to wake up to a huge artist who is truly talented. One of Japan's most influential and best-selling musical artists released a cover of the Carpenter song Close to You under the name Cubic U. But it only sold 3,000 copies. After rebranding, she hit the big time in 1999. Stay tuned for that story. The final episode of Sailor Moon aired on February 8th, but Japan had some more anime tricks up its sleeve. The Neon Genesis Evangelion series moved from the small screen to the big screen. Death and Rebirth and the end of Evangelion cemented the franchise as a culturally significant and psychologically complex anime. The world said goodbye to Toshiro Mifune. He was a legendary actor. You might recognize him for his roles in the Kurosawa films like Seven Samurai, Rashomon, and Yojimbo. He was 77. And Masaru Ibuka, co-founder of Sony Corporation. His innovations helped shape the global electronics industry. He was 89. Many famous people were born this year, but let's focus on three absolute dynamos. Naomi Osaka, known for her 120-mile-per-hour serve and outspoken nature. Daizen Maeda, who's tearing up football pitches for Celtic Football Club, as well as Japan's own national squad. Then there's Erika Ikuta, Tokyo's own shining star, stealing hearts as a Nogizaka 46 idol and actress. We hear about population decline all the time. How bad is it really? Well, by 1997, the elderly population, 23.6 million, was roughly 20 times greater than the number of babies being born, roughly 1.2 million. This stark contrast highlights the demographic inversion, meaning a growing elderly population and a shrinking youth population. Fun fact, adult diapers outsell baby diapers in Japan. Actually, there's nothing fun about diapers, but it is a fact. There were no significant natural disasters like the Kobe earthquake, but there were some red flags. A 1997 National Land Agency report highlighted overpopulation in Tokyo as a barrier to effective disaster preparations. The population inflow from the country puts increased pressure on infrastructure and evacuation systems. In other words, when that big one finally hits, we're cooked. One crime shocked the nation with its gruesome nature. Seriously, it was brutal. Imagine walking up to the front gate of your school and discovering the head of an 11-year-old boy. This was the scene at a Kobe junior high school. Now imagine the killer left a note in his mouth, threatening to kill 3 children a week. But that's not even the darkest part. The case took a sinister turn when a 14-year-old boy confessed to the crime. According to police reports, there was a significant rise in crimes committed by foreigners. These reports contributed once again to negative public perception of foreigners. What was left out of the headlines is the fact that many of those arrested were working for the Yakuza. Looks like you can have your cake and eat it too. Outsource your dirty work? Blame it on foreigners. Now, how could a scene from a beloved cartoon send 700 kids to the hospital? An episode of Pokémon featuring Pikachu's Thunderbolt attack did just that. Flashing lights triggered seizures and nausea in viewers, mostly children. Dubbed the Pokémon Shock, this alarming event led to widespread hospitalizations. This is not the footage in question, but you get the picture without the trip to the hospital. What was happening in the economy? The Asian financial crisis, which began in July with the devaluation of the Thai baht, significantly affected Japan. As a major economic power in Asia, Japan experienced ripple effects, including weakened export markets and increased pressure on its financial institutions with exposure to Southeast Asia. Now, what do two companies do when things aren't working out well for either of them? They move in together. Sega was struggling with its Saturn platform, and Bandai was struggling after the failure of the Pippin gaming system. So they decided to merge. But with the success of the Tamagotchi, Bandai told Sega, I kind of like being single. And the merger never happened. The aftershocks of the bubble bursting were still being felt. Sanyo Securities was forced to close their doors after severely overextending themselves. Hokkaido Takushoku Bank, established in 1899, crumbled under the weight of its non-performing loans it made during the bubble. Takeo City Bank was left holding over 58 billion in bad loans and had to close down. The bank had been serving Sendai since 1942. But the meltdown was not over. Yamaichi Securities, after years of hiding losses in dummy corporations and paying off racketeers, could no longer hold it together. With 3 trillion yen, about $24 billion in liabilities, they closed up shop. It was the largest corporate failure in post-war Japan. 7,500 people lost their jobs, and the Bank of Japan called it Dark November. How do you slow down an economy that's already slowed down? Anybody who's played SimCity Classic knows when you raise taxes, the economy slows down. But that's exactly what the Japanese government decided to do. The consumption tax, which was introduced in 1989 at 3%, was raised to 5%. The extra revenue was earmarked for funding pensions, healthcare, and other social programs. But this slowed down the economy, worsening the economic downturn. The tax hike became a political liability for the LDP. The hard economic times led to innovation. Founded by Hiroshi Mikitani, Rakuten started as an online marketplace and has grown into one of Japan's leading e-commerce platforms, often compared to Amazon. They diversified into mobile communications, becoming Japan's 4th major mobile carrier. Consumers can rack up loyalty points by using Rakuten Ichiba, an online shopping platform, Rakuten Travel, Rakuten Bank, and Rakuten Card. Personally, I find their website cluttered and difficult to navigate. 1997 also saw the birth of Kakaku.com, which operates one of Japan's leading price comparison websites, allowing consumers to compare prices across various retailers. They also run Tabelog, a popular restaurant review platform. This is a service I've actually used, and they have an English translation of their website. I put a link below so you can check it out. The Kyoto Protocol was adopted as a pioneering effort in global climate policy. It established the principle of legally binding commitments and innovative mechanisms like carbon trading. While 84 nations signed the protocol, we already know that not everybody followed it. As you can see, it was another year of stagnation, but also innovation. Coming up in 1998, Japan struggles to find its new identity, while still pumping out pop culture. Don't forget about the Winter Olympics in Nagano, showcasing Japan's hospitality. There's some unforgettable moments coming up, so stick around. What happened in Japan in 1998? Buckle up for a journey back to a year that saw the nation in flux. From cutting-edge tech breakthroughs that changed the world to electrifying cultural milestones, prolonged financial crisis, and game-changing political moments. Let's rewind and relive the events that defined 1998. Starting with technology, 1998 is often regarded as one of the greatest years in video game history. There were groundbreaking titles like The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time and Metal Gear Solid, which defined the stealth genre. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time set standards for 3D action-adventure games. About 7.6 million copies were sold worldwide for the Nintendo 64. If you include re-releases like the GameCube and 3DS, the total sales across all platforms are estimated to be around 12.6 million copies. The year saw a mix of sequels like Resident Evil 2 and F-Zero X. There were innovative new properties like Banjo-Kazooie and Radiant Silvergun. There were also Japan exclusives like Shining Force 3, specifically Scenarios 2 and 3, and Dragon Force 2. They later gained cult followings due to fan translations. The arcade scene also thrived with titles like Tekken 3 and Dance Dance Revolution. The Game Boy Color debuted, bringing color to handheld gaming and boosting Pokémon's global dominance. It's estimated that between 55 and 60 million units have sold since its release. The launch of the Sega Dreamcast was the beginning and the end. It marked the start of the 6th generation of consoles, but it was Sega's final entry into the market. Due to financial struggles and the Dreamcast's underperformance, Sega discontinued it in 2001. The Dreamcast sold approximately 9 million units worldwide, compared to about 102 million units of the original PlayStation. Sega exited the console market, shifting to software development and arcade games. On the world stage, the iMac was released, and 2 PhD students from Stanford University, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, created Google. They started it as a research project called Backrub. The International Space Station began construction with the launch of the Zarya module by Russia. Not to be left out, Japan launched the Nozomi probe to Mars, joining the United States and Russia as a space-exploring nation. This mission, led by the Institute of Space and Astronautical Science, now part of JAXA, aimed to study the atmosphere of Mars and its magnetic field. Fun fact, Nozomi means hope in Japanese. And this becomes very important because the probe was supposed to reach Mars in October 1999, but a few glitches delayed its departure from Earth's orbit. and it eventually got to Mars in December 2003. Never give up hope. On April 5th, the Akashi Kaikyo Bridge connecting Shikoku and Honshu opened to traffic. With a central span of 1,991 meters, it became the world's longest suspension bridge at the time. About 23,000 cars crossed the bridge daily. And there were cultural milestones. The Winter Olympics in Nagano saw the debut of snowboarding. The Japanese men's large hill team won the gold medal in ski jumping. Kazuyoshi Funaki, Masahiko Harada, Takanori Kono, and Hiroya Saito became legends with their historic win. Japanese athletes won a total of 10 medals, 5 gold, 1 silver, and 4 bronze, marking the country's best performance at a Winter Olympics up to that point. But what would the Olympics be without a scandal? The Games had serious issues. Allegations of financial mismanagement and lack of transparency dogged the organizing committee. After the Games, the accounting records were mysteriously destroyed, fueling speculation of corruption and cover-up. While Titanic was busy winning 11 Academy Awards, Pokémon, the first movie, Mewtwo Strikes Back, was a massive success, capitalizing on the Pokémon franchise's global popularity. If you're a horror film fan, you know the Japanese horror films are some of the most terrifying ever. Directed by Hideo Nakata, the horror film Ring became a cultural phenomenon, spawning sequels and international remakes. Ring grossed 1.7 billion yen, about $13 million, at the box office in Japan, and opened the door for the J-horror genre. It paved the way for Hollywood remakes of other J-horror films, including The Grudge, Dark Water, and Pulse. The world mourned the passing of Yoshifumi Kondo. He was an animator and film director known for his work on Studio Ghibli films like Kiki's Delivery Service and Whisper of the Heart. He was 47. As philosopher Billy Joel once said, "Only the good die young." Former Prime Minister Sosuke Uno died at the age of 75. And one of the most influential directors of all time, one of my favorites, known for films like Rashomon and Seven Samurai, Akira Kurosawa, died at the age of 88. Who would be on your Mount Rushmore of directors? Who's the GOAT? Tell me in the comments below. And of course, there were some famous births. 3 members of AKB48, Moe Aigisa, Rina Hirata, and Shiori Kita. Mone Kamishirishi, famous for voicing Mitsuha Miyamizu in the critically acclaimed anime Your Name. And one of the greatest kickboxers of modern history, Tenshin Nasukawa. Vulnerability to natural disasters is a prevalent theme in any discussion of Japanese history. The 1998 typhoon season was particularly active. Typhoon Vicky hit the Kansai region, causing damage to homes, crops, and infrastructure. Typhoon Zeb hit Kyushu, causing widespread flooding and landslides. It reached speeds of up to 250 kilometers per hour, about 155 miles per hour. That's about as fast as a bullet train or an F1 race car. What happened in the economy? The GDP was about $4.6 trillion, and the average exchange rate was about 131 yen to the dollar. The Pokemon Company was founded as a joint venture between Nintendo, Game Freak, and Creatures. Initially established as the Pokemon Center Company, it later rebranded to manage the licensing, marketing, and overall operations of the Pokemon franchise. This includes games, anime, merchandise, and trading cards. Turning now to politics, Bill Clinton was impeached, but it was Prime Minister Ryutaro Hashimoto who ended up resigning. The people were frustrated with the LDP's handling of the economy and a very unpopular consumption tax increase in 1997. It turns out that doing a poor job is actually worse than getting a, well, you know. Keizo Obuchi, a relatively low-profile LDP politician, was appointed as prime minister. His leadership focused on economic recovery. The Diet passed the Financial Reconstruction Law, allowing the government to nationalize failing banks. Always a good idea. The law established the Financial Reconstruction Committee to oversee the process. What could go wrong? Prime Minister Obuchi and South Korean President Kim Dae-jung issued the Japan-South Korea Joint Declaration, marking a step toward reconciliation over historical issues and fostering stronger bilateral ties. The declaration emphasized collaboration in areas such as economy, culture, security, and regional stability. It also paved the way for cultural exchanges, notably the lifting of South Korea's ban on Japanese films, music, and manga, which had been in place since 1945. This was implemented gradually, with significant steps like allowing Japanese films and music in 1999. As we close the book on 1998, Japan stood at a crossroads. Coming up in 1999, we've got the worst nuclear disaster until Fukushima. One of the most influential Japanese artists breaks onto the music scene, and Japan gets an official flag and national anthem. Finally, will Japan lift itself out of its decade-long slump? Find out in 1999. What happened in Japan in 1999? Fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times. We're taking a wild ride back to 1999. Japan unleashed a tidal wave of mind-blowing tech that rocked the planet. There were epic games and a massive console reveal that left fans losing their minds. But that's not all. We'll take a look at the technology that lit the fuse of the smartphone explosion. Luffy sailed onto the screen, Ring 2 creeped us out, and Utada Hikaru broke our hearts. We're going to relive the highs, the sighs, and the heartbreaking lows, and everything in between. Let's break it down. Technological breakthroughs. 1999 marked a high point for Japan's gaming industry. Nintendo, Sony, Sega, Square, and Capcom all came out to play. There are too many games to list, so let's just go over the big ones. How do you follow up Pokemon Red, Green, and Blue? Add more colors. Pokemon Gold and Silver for Game Boy Color were released in November. Between the release and re-releases, about 23 million copies have been sold globally. Final Fantasy VII for PlayStation sold 2.5 million copies in Japan in 1999 alone, making it one of the top-selling PlayStation games of the year. Globally, it has sold over 8 million copies. And Gran Turismo roared onto the PlayStation scene, selling over 1.7 million copies globally. Of course, Japan was the key market. And what makes it so good? The realistic graphics and the extensive car roster. If you can't drive a GTR, a Silvia, or Evo in real life, you can drive one in the game. This resonated strongly with Japanese fans. The series was a flagship title for Sony. And by the way, have you seen Gran Turismo 7? What do you think? Is it worth it? Now, the influence of J-horror on games cannot be understated. Silent Hill for PlayStation was a psychological horror game. It established a new franchise, known for its atmospheric storytelling and unsettling tone. Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 64 sold almost 2 million copies globally. Once again, Japan was a significant market. Without a doubt, Nintendo's brand strength and popularity of the Nintendo 64 helped out quite a lot. The multiplayer appeal and Nintendo's popular characters also drove its success. The unique crossover fighting concept was particularly popular among younger players. But the highlight of the year was the Sony PlayStation 2 announcement. Sony hosted a major event in Tokyo to unveil the PS2 console, sending fans into a frenzy. However, they had to wait till 2000 to actually get their hands on one. But it wasn't just games. NTT Docomo launched the iMode networking standard, pioneering mobile internet service. iMode used a simplified version of HTML optimized for small screens. Users could access the web, send emails, make mobile payments, and stream video. Now, these are things we all take for granted today, but in 1999, it was mind-blowing. Imagine you don't have to sit down at your computer to send an email. By 2002, there were over 34 million subscribers in Japan. This set a global benchmark for mobile internet services. And there were cultural milestones. The anime One Piece premiered on October 20th, produced by Toei Animation, based on Eiichiro Oda's manga. It became a global cultural phenomenon. The numbers are insane. The anime has over 1,100 episodes. That's 39 seasons on Netflix. There have been over 15 animated movies. The manga is one of the longest running ever. 1,100 chapters, 108 volumes, translated into over 60 languages. There are over 1,000 named characters, so don't worry if you can't keep up. Of course, the most recognizable is Luffy with his straw hat. J-horror continued to captivate fans with its chilling narratives. The iconic Ring, released in 1998, was followed by Ring 2 in 1999. But did you know there was a lesser-known sequel called Rasen, which was released simultaneously with Ring? Now, Rasen flopped due to its slow pacing and confusing plot. The fans didn't really connect with it. It was nothing like Ring's clear, gripping terror, and as a result, it was overshadowed by Ring 2, which totally ignored Rasen's plotline and became the official sequel to Ring. Rasen became a footnote. Ring 2 was the second highest grossing Japanese film of 1999. Total box office revenue was about 3.6 billion yen, about $31 million, while the original movie grossed about 1.7 billion yen, or $13 million. But what was the highest grossing Japanese film of 1999? None other than Pokemon the movie Mewtwo Strikes Back. Released in July 1998, it continued its run in theaters well into 1999, grossing about 7.25 billion yen, about $70 million at the time. And after years of effort, soccer or football comes of age. The Japanese team at the FIFA World Youth Championship in Nigeria surprised everyone with their unexpected run to the finals. They pulled off miracle goals to defeat Portugal and Mexico along the way, before eventually losing to Spain 4-0 in the final. The world said goodbye to Akio Morita, co-founder of Sony Corporation. He was instrumental in transforming Sony into a household name. He was 78. Fans mourned the passing of Kazue Takahashi, She was known for voicing characters in series like Sazae-san, one of my favorites. Her contribution to the early growth of Japan's anime industry cannot be ignored. She was 70. And the artist behind the manga Itazura no Kiss, meaning mischievous kiss or playful kiss, Kaoru Tada, passed away at the age of 38. There were famous births. Mizuki Yamashita, member of the idol group Nogizaka 46. Kanna Hashimoto, actress and former idol, known for her roles in films like Sailor Suit and Machine Gun, Graduation, and Gintama. And Fuju Kamio, known for his roles in Kamen Rider and dramas like Coffee and Vanilla. Okay, how many singers have a Netflix series based on one of their songs? Not many. Born in New York City, Utada Hikaru is one of Japan's most influential and best-selling Japanese artists of all time. But she didn't start out that way. She debuted under the stage name Cubic U with a cover of the Carpenters song Close to You. Her first album, sung in English, only sold 3,000 copies in the US, and you'd think she'd be done. But she gained massive fame in Japan under her real name, with her Japanese language debut album, First Love. It sold over 7.6 million copies. The title song, First Love, still brings fans to tears. She was 16 years old when she first recorded it. It became the inspiration for a Netflix series under the same name, with references to the lyrics used in scenes in the series. So downstairs I put links to 2 performances of First Love, the original by 16-year-old Utada Hikaru and a later piano-accompanied version from the first take over 20 years later. I really love the first take. Go check that out, by the way. Check out both versions. Which one do you prefer? The raw emotion of the teenage version or the reflective depth of the adult performance? She truly is one of a kind. Let's move on to disasters. On September 30th, an accident occurred at a uranium reprocessing facility in Tokaimura, Ibaraki Prefecture. Workers of the plant mishandled uranium, triggering an uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction. 2 workers died and over 600 people were exposed to radiation. The incident, Japan's worst disaster until Fukushima in 2011, raised concerns about nuclear safety and led to stricter regulations. Of course, the impact of typhoons can never be underestimated. In September, Typhoon Bart, not that Bart, struck Okinawa, Kyushu, and Honshu, the main island. Wind speeds reached up to 185 kilometers per hour, or 115 miles per hour. Over 80,000 homes were damaged, and another 800,000 lost power. 48 people lost their lives. The ecological damage was also felt. It took the bird population 2 years to recover. What happened in the economy? Japan was still grappling with the aftermath of the collapse of the bubble. The 90s were marked by stagnation and deflation. In 1999, the government implemented stimulus packages and the Bank of Japan maintained near zero interest rates. Some early signs of recovery emerged with slight GDP growth, but the economy remained fragile. The GDP, which had been steadily declining for 3 years, finally started to rise again. It hit about $4.6 trillion, and the exchange rate was about 114 yen to the dollar. There were major political events. Through 1999, Prime Minister Keizo Obuchi was known for his low-key, consensus-building leadership style. In fact, his nickname was Mr. Ordinary. Wouldn't that be nice? His main focus was just getting the economy back on track, which he did by injecting significant funds into the economy. This was meant to address bad loans and encourage consumer spending. But his contributions to Japan's image on the global stage cannot be ignored. He laid the groundwork for the 2000 G8 summit in Okinawa, a significant event for Japan. Now, what 2 things does every country have? A flag and a national anthem. But until 1999, Japan didn't have either of these, officially. In July, the Diet passed controversial legislation recognizing the Hinamaru as the national flag and Kimigayo as the national anthem. The delay in formal adoption stemmed from historical and political sensitivities. Both the Hinamaru and Kimigayo were associated with Japan's imperial and militaristic past, particularly during World War II. As you can guess, the legislation sparked domestic debate over nationalism and militarism. Who led the resistance to adopting the Hinamaru? The teachers. And why would they do that? Well, if you look back in history, it was the education system that pushed Japan's youth headlong into World War II. So they were adamant they'd never repeat that mistake again. Despite fierce resistance, the Hinamaru was adopted as the national flag. That's it for the 90s, a hell of a decade, but we're not done yet. Moving on, we got the year 2000. Anime, J-pop, and Shibuya Harajuku fashion dominate Asia. Japan begins a tentative recovery from the lost decade, but suffers a major setback with the death of a key leader. Amid all the changes, one thing remains constant: The resilience of the Japanese people never falters. See you in the next video.